My name is Ivan Orlov. I'm a Russian who's currently on January 17th, 1945, 25 years old. I had been in the Red Army fighting the Germans for about a year and a half by now, and we were standing on the edge of victory. In the summer of last year, we had pushed into the Bialystok district, which was a part of Germany proper after they had invaded the Soviet Union in 1941. At the same time, we moved into the general government, which the Nazi used to round up all undesirables like Jews, Roma, Poles, Russians, etc. During the time I was in the Red Army, I fought bravely for the motherland, not showing any form of fear to our fascist enemies. I was in a squad of 25 soldiers, primarily made up of males, but some were females. Although I respected every one of them, there were 5 members of our squad I was closest to. First, we have Natalia Sokolov, the female sergeant of our squad. She's about 1.77 meters tall, with hazel brown eyes, medium dark hair, and slender build. Although she doesn't shy from giving us orders on the battlefield, in our free time, she has conversations with her squad members as if she's a normal soldier herself. She's like a mother figure of the squad, which I truly saw when she once saved me from almost being shot by a German Wehrmacht soldier. Next, we have Valery Lebedev. He's considered to be the brawn of the squad, about 1.97 meters tall, dark blonde, light blue eyes, muscular build. Though he might be an excellent and unwavering soldier on the battlefield, towards his comrades, he's a gentle giant. In our free time, he often makes jokes with the purpose to keep the morale of his comrades high. He's also an excellent dancer, able to dance the Prisiatka dance for like 5 to 10 minutes straight. But God, how much vodka he can drink during a celebration is beyond even Russian standards. He once drank half a bottle in 30 seconds without parting his lips from it to catch his breath. I don't know if he has a very strong immune system or condition in his blood, but the alcohol he consumes doesn't take him over easily, even after drinking a whole bottle in one evening. Then we have Yuri Orlov. Yuri is my 1.5-year younger half-brother who looks similar to me. We both have the same blue eyes and the same red hair, only I am about 1.82 meters tall, whereas Yuri is about 1.78 meters tall. My biological mother died of a disease when I was only an infant, leaving my dad heartbroken. But Dad knew I needed the warmth and care and comfort of a mother, so he married my stepmother, and they had Yuri together. Despite her not being my biological mother, she always cared for me like I was her biological son, and I saw her as the only mother I ever knew. Yuri himself had always been a very introvert and modest person. I always stood up for him in school, since he was frequently bullied by others. Yet, for all the hardships he underwent, he made it through. Even when training in the same boot camp as me, he succeeded, although his peers often scolded him for not being fast enough in heavy physical exercises. He later joined the same squad I was in, but really soon, it became clear that Yuri was physically the weakest of the squad, if not the entire platoon. But whereas he lacks physical strength, he surely makes up for it when it comes to intelligence. Although Yuri is younger than me, he was moved to the same class I was in because of his high intelligence. Since our days as recruits in the boot camp, and especially after we joined the Red Army, Yuri is shown to be a mastermind when it comes to complex strategies and battle tactics, both on the battlefield and the chessboard. Every person in the platoon that had played chess against him was easily outmaneuvered and beaten by him. Hell, even some of our commanders and colonels played chess against him. All of them lost. He also once made up a complex strategy to quickly and effectively attack German positions near the Belarusian city of Pinsk. His strategy bore success, and the platoon barely lost any soldiers in the process. Both the squad, the platoon, and even our superiors quickly praised Yuri for his brilliant mind. But because of his modest personality, he doesn't brag about it or take pride in it in the slightest. Many of us, including myself, say that because of Yuri's mind, the entire regiment had been saved from disaster countless times. We also have Boris Petrov, the oldest person of the squad, a frail man in his mid-50s who has brown hair that seem to have grayed, green eyes, and is about 1.79 meters tall. He's a veteran from the Russian Civil War, where he fought on the side of the Bolsheviks. Boris was also one of the soldiers that had fought the German during the Battle of Moscow. He had survived the entirety of the war between Germany and the Soviet Union up until now, but lost the entire platoon he was previously in due to a German ambush in early 1943. Boris was the only survivor of that ambush and made a personal vow that he would see the Third Reich toppled, and that our red flag would fly high and proudly over Berlin. Like Yuri, Boris too is a very intelligent and well-educated person, but his intelligence primarily focuses on languages. Other than Russian, he can fluently speak Ukrainian, Belarusian, Polish, English, and even German. This makes him useful to interrogate captured German soldiers and translating German documents at the moment we take possession of them. And finally, there's Irina Medved, the love of my life, a slender woman the same age as me, about 1.79 meters tall, with short light brown hair and blue eyes like a deep ocean. I was instantly in love with her when I first saw her, but I didn't dare to confess it. It wasn't until the Battle of Lublin, after I rescued her from an SS soldier that was on the brink of stabbing her with a bayonet, that I confessed my feelings to her when we were sitting together on a roof of a ruined building during sunset. She told me that she actually felt the same way for a long time, but also didn't dare to say anything, because she was afraid that I would react in a furious way. Then we looked each other in the eyes and kissed. It was only 2 days after our confession that the others in the squad knew about our relationship, in which Valerie would make many jokes about it, where we would laugh and smile at. When Yuri and I are alone, he always says to me that me and Irina make a fine couple together, that we are truly meant for each other. Me and Irina did promise that once the war was over, we would return to Russia, get married, get a job, and happily raise a family together. We had all fought battle after battle, like Gomel, Pinsk, and Lublin, but many others as well. We all endured like a real team. By now, we were deep in the territory of the central government, the lands that had once been the heartland of Poland. I remember clearly when the Red Army reached the eastern part of Warsaw, the city that had once been the Polish capital. There, in mid-September 1944, we took parts of the city east of the Vistula River. Around that time, the Warsaw Uprising was taking place, where the Polish underground resistance movement fought fiercely against the German occupiers in the parts of Warsaw west of Vistula. Yet, despite the Poles now being our allies, we did not aid them. Our superiors told us to simply stay put on the eastern banks of the Vistula, despite the fact that many soldiers of the Red Army were against this act, including my closest comrades and myself. We didn't dare to protest against our superiors. We would have been shot if we did. So we watched. We watched how Polish resistance fighters and German soldiers brutally fought and killed each other in the western parts of Warsaw. During that time, many Polish civilians of the city were mercilessly butchered by the Nazis. Eventually, on October 9th, 1944, the Polish resistance fighters in Warsaw surrendered. Yet, we still didn't cross the Vistula. After the Poles in Warsaw had surrendered, many of its people were expelled from the city, and as a last ditch of revenge, German soldiers under the orders of Heinrich Himmler destroyed almost every standing building in Warsaw. Most of the destruction came from dynamite and flamethrowers. On January 17th, 1945, after the Germans had retreated out of the city, we finally crossed the Vistula and entered the ruins of what had once been the prosperous Polish capital. There are places in the world where even the snow seems to die before it touches the ground. That was my first thought after we crossed the river and stepped into the ruins of the western part of Warsaw. The snow didn't fall gently here. It hung in the air like ash and dropped in fits, as though unsure whether it wanted to settle on this cursed soil. The air was colder on this side of the river, not just in temperature, but in spirit. It clawed at the skin and crept into the bones like it wanted to stay. This was not a place for the living. The six of us, me, Yuri, Irina, Valerie, Natalia, and Boris, walked at the center of the squad's formation. Our rifles were ready, but there was no one to shoot. No Wehrmacht soldiers, no soldiers of the SS, not even enraged Polish resistance fighters, since they had all been beaten and expelled months ago. Just silence. We moved past the shattered remains of what had once been buildings, now nothing more than blackened husks. The street signs were gone, probably torn down by the Nazis during the occupation or destroyed in the firebombing afterward. A twisted tram track jutted out from under the debris like ribs of a buried beast. I don't like this at all. Yuri muttered. He was walking slightly behind me, eyes dotting to every shadow. It's like the city's holding its breath. No, Boris replied in a low voice. The city already exhaled. What we see now is the emptiness left behind. I looked to my right. Irina was quiet. Her blue eyes reflected the dull gray sky as she took in the destruction with an expression I couldn't quite read. I squeezed her hand once through my glove. She didn't speak, just gave me the faintest nod. Ahead, Lieutenant Arseniev raised a fist, signaling a halt. "We'll proceed down this boulevard," he said, gesturing toward a wider path flanked by decimated storefronts. "Keep alert. I don't want anyone wandering off. Understood?" "Yes, Comrade Lieutenant," the squad replied in unison. As we marched on, Valerie broke the silence. "My mother used to write to her cousin in Warsaw before the war," he said, mostly to himself. Said the city was beautiful in spring, that its parks could make even Moscow jealous. "Hard to imagine now," Natalia said. She stepped over a pile of bricks, pausing to help Irina across a collapsed doorway. Even ghosts would be afraid to linger here. We passed what used to be a hospital. Half of its signs still hung above the entrance, blackened and scorched. Spital Wojskowe. The rest had been burned away. Inside, we found them. Dozens of corpses, some skeletal, collapsed in hospital beds, still draped in frozen sheets. Others had been burned down to bone, piled in corners or fused to the floor. The smell had frozen into the walls, a sour metallic rot. Even time couldn't wash it away. Yuri looked like he wanted to vomit, but swallowed it down. We didn't linger. Outside the hospital, we turned down what must have once been a market street. The metal skeletons of market stalls jutted out of the snow. A small child's shoe lay perfectly untouched on a windowsill, but the other shoe was nowhere to be seen. "You know," Boris said quietly, "rumors say that Himmler gave the order himself to level Warsaw to the ground as punishment, a citywide execution." "Then he succeeded," Irina said in a low whisper. Natalia nodded toward a partially destroyed school building ahead. "Let's search that next." We walked to the school, which was so horrible to look at from the outside. But the inside was worse. Chalkboards still held faint accretions. One room still had books, scattered and burned, pages half burned into puddles of ink and ash. In one hallway, a row of desks remained upright. But behind each one, a charred corpse sat, hunched forward like they were still taking a test when death came. Valerie, who was usually the loudest among us, said nothing. His lips were tight and his shoulders tense. "You okay there, Comrade Valerie?" I asked him as we emerged from the school and stepped back into the snow. He gave me a look I'd never seen from him before. "I've seen battlefields, but this wasn't war. This was deliberate." We all knew he was right. As the day wore on, we passed monuments, now rubble, museums, now mausoleums. A cathedral's steeple had collapsed through its own roof, leaving shattered stained glass spread like razors across the ground. We crossed a plaza where the remains of a tank sat half buried in snow. Its turret twisted, hatch torn open. Around it were at least a dozen corpses, both with German and Polish uniforms, both locked in their final fatal poses. It felt wrong to speak, so we didn't. Not until we reached what had once been a public library. Its roof was gone, its columns blackened. On the stone steps out front, a skeletal sat upright with its back against the wall, a burnt book still in its lap. Boris crouched beside it, pulling the ruined tome carefully from the bone's stiff fingers. "It's a song from Goethe," he said after a pause. "Faust. The irony is unbearable." That night, we made camp on the far western outskirts of the ruined city. A collapsed building provided a partial windbreak. Valerie built a fire from broken furniture and scraps of shelving, while Yuri searched for anything flammable that wasn't soaked. We gathered around the fire in a loose circle, huddled in our greatcoats. The flames danced in our eyes, but none of us truly felt warm. For a while, we didn't talk. We just stared at the fire and listened to the wind brush through the ruins like an unseen mourner. Then, Natalia spoke. "When I was a child, I read a story about Warsaw, about its sirens. Valerie raised an eyebrow. Sirens? Like in the sea? She shook her head. No, the Sirenka, a mermaid who protected the city. Legend said she lived in the Vistula and would rise to defend the people of Warsaw in their darkest hour. Irina gave a sad smile. Seems she didn't rise fast enough. Boris nodded slowly. Or perhaps even she was too horrified to show her face. We lapsed into silence again, each lost in our own memories. For a time, I forgot the snow, forgot the war. I only saw my squad, these people I had marched beside, fought beside, bled beside. Then Valerie, trying to lift the gloom, leaned forward and said, Come, Yuri, play us something. You always carry that harmonica. Yuri gave a tired smile and pulled the worn little instrument from his coat pocket. Any requests? Something Polish, Natalia said softly. In memory. Yuri hesitated, then began to play a quiet, mournful tune, one I had never heard before, but felt like it had always lived somewhere in the corners of my soul. As the melody drifted through the night air, Irina leaned her head on my right shoulder. I put my right arm around her and stared into the fire, feeling its heat just barely reach my face. The song ended. For a few seconds, no one said a word. And then, from far off in the ruins, so distant we might have imagined it, we heard something. Not a scream, not quite. A sound like weeping. Low, echoing. We all looked at each other. Could be the wind, Natalia said quickly. Could be, Yuri echoed, though his hands were shaking slightly as he pocketed the harmonica. Valerie stood slowly and reached for his rifle. No one goes alone tonight, he said. None of us argued. That night, I dreamt of Warsaw before it burned, of music and children laughing in the snow, of Irina dancing barefoot in the summer grass. And when I woke in the dead of night, I could have sworn I saw someone standing in the ruins across from our camp. A silhouette, tall, unmoving, watching. But when I blinked, it was gone, and the wind began to weep again. January 18th, 1945. The snow fell harder on the morning of January 18th, as if trying to bury what was left of Warsaw before we could see too much. The wind came howling through the skeletons of broken buildings, catching the loose ash and sweeping it over the frozen corpses, littering the city's edge. We woke to cold silence, colder than the night before, the kind of silence that made your ears ring. Not one bird, not even the bark of a stray dog, just 6 breathing humans packed together near the embers of a dying fire, each one too aware of the other's shallow breath. Lieutenant Arsenyev, however, wasted no time. We're not here to mourn, he said, stamping his feet to get warm. High Command wants this city swept, especially the outskirts. The Germans left in a hurry. Anything they forgot, any artillery, guns or documents, we collect. Understood? Understood, Comrade Lieutenant, we echoed. He then looked over at the 3 of us, me, Yuri and Irina, and pointed toward the south. You 3 take that section. If you find anything, signal the entire squad. Yes, Comrade Lieutenant, the 3 of us said aloud. We then moved out, rifles slung, boots crunching in rhythm over the snow-draped ruins. The city's edge had once been industrial, trams, foundries, apartments for workers and engineers. Now it was an open graveyard of twisted beams and ruptured chimneys. We passed the carcass of a tram that had run off its rails and crashed into a wall, its front window shattered inward like an open wound. The snow didn't cover up the rot here. It only highlighted the destruction, outlining the violence in powder-white contrast. We didn't speak for a while. Eventually, Yuri broke the silence. I had a dream last night, he said, kicking a loose brick from our path. Irina raised an eyebrow. What kind of dream, Yuri? He shrugged. I was playing chess, against someone I couldn't see. I never saw his face, but no matter what move I made, I was always 2 steps behind. and somehow the place I was sitting in was ice cold. Sounds like your subconscious is still fighting the war, I offered. Yuri smiled, but there was no humor in it. Yeah, maybe. We passed the half-collapsed warehouse. Its walls caved in from a direct shell hit. The smell of fuel lingered in the air. Even after months of abandonment, we found nothing inside but scorched crates and a melted typewriter. As we moved in, Irina brushed some snow off a chart sign. This used to be a factory for tram parts, she murmured. My grandfather visited it once, years ago. He said the engineers here were brilliant. We stepped carefully through the ruins, half expecting each turn to reveal something grotesque. A trap, a body, a German hiding in the rubble. But the city remained eerily still. 40 minutes passed. We found little but debris, twisted rebar, and occasional frozen corpses. Polish, German, and sometimes unidentifiable. Most were long dead, their flesh withered or burned away. Others had been recently unearthed by the snow. One looked like a child. We said nothing. That's when Yuri noticed something. Wait, over there. He pointed at a squat concrete structure, partially collapsed but still holding form. There was something off about it. It was less ruined than everything else around it. Less organic somehow. The windows were shattered, but the glass was thick, almost reinforced. What do you think this was? Irina asked. Could have been anything, I said. An administrative post? Maybe a factory office? No signs, Yuri noted. Not even old ones. We approached cautiously. The snow was thicker here, unbroken, no tracks but ours. That alone was strange. Scavengers always left trails, even in winter. Inside, the air changed. The temperature dropped by at least 10 degrees. There was no reason for it. No broken pipes, no exposed ventilation, just a chill that didn't make sense. The front room had collapsed halfway, burned desks, fallen beams, shredded paperwork turned to mulch. Some parts of the second floor had given way, spilling down like an avalanche of plaster and char. And then Yuri stopped, dead still. Hold on, he whispered. He stepped toward the center of the room and knelt. Something had caught his eye. His gloved hands pushed away snow and soot from a large, torn-up carpet buried beneath debris. The fabric peeled away like a scab. And underneath it, metal. We helped clear the rest. What we uncovered was a massive steel trapdoor, square and solid, bolted at the corners and slightly recessed into the floor. The surface was marked by a black swastika, and in the center of the swastika, etched in deep sharp lines, was the unmistakable S rune of the SS. The air in the room seemed to tighten, like something holding its breath. Irina stepped back immediately. No, she whispered. Whatever this is, it doesn't belong here. Yuri ran his hand along the edge. This wasn't part of the original building. This was added, reinforced. I felt something churn in my stomach. We don't open it. Not yet. We get the others. Irina nodded, already moving for the exit. I'll find a squat. As she vanished into the snow, Yuri and I circled the trapdoor. No handles, he murmured. Just these bolts. They're not rusted. Look. He tapped one. Polished. Maintained. I crouched beside him, brushing the frost off the edge. How deep do you think it goes? Too deep, Yuri said without hesitation. It wasn't long before we heard the crunch of boots outside, then voices. Valerie ducked in first, followed by Boris, Irina, and Natalia. Behind them came 3 others from our squad, then the rest, and finally Lieutenant Arsenyev. What is this? The lieutenant asked, eyes narrowing at the trapdoor. Nazi, Yuri said simply. But not part of the surface building. It was hidden. Valerie stepped up, looking down at the hatch with quiet contempt. Think it opens? He asked. Not by itself, I said. It's sealed tight. Valerie cracked his knuckles and said, Step back. We moved aside. Valerie wedged his fingers into a small groove in the trapdoor and strained. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the metal groaned, a low grinding shriek that echoed through the room like a death rattle. With one last wrench, the door ripped free and slammed against the floor, sending a shockwave through the ground. Beneath it, a staircase descended into total blackness. Not rubble, not dirt. Perfect, smooth gray concrete steps. The air rising from below wasn't foul, but it wasn't stale either. It was cold, sterile even. Lights on, Arsenyev ordered. Weapons ready. Our flashlights flicked on one by one, beams slicing into the void. Descend, the lieutenant said. One at a time. Comrade Orlov, you lead. I nodded, tightening my grip on my rifle and stepping toward the edge. For a moment, I hesitated. There was something about the darkness below. Not just shadow, but depth. A kind of ancient, endless quiet that vibrated against the light. Still, I went first. And so the entire squad descended into the darkness. Each step echoed as we descended. Concrete under our boots. The walls were smooth. Uniform. Not a crack. Not a hint of erosion. This wasn't wartime construction. It was surgical. Precise. As if the SS had poured everything into this one place. The others followed, slowly, one by one. I could hear Boris muttering prayers behind me in Russian. Natalia breathed slowly, rhythmically, like she was preparing for combat. And Irina was just behind me, didn't say a word. We descended for minutes, and then the staircase stopped, and ahead of us, a wide hallway opened. The walls were white, no dust, no mold, no blood, just perfect, clean concrete. I raised my flashlight, and the beam illuminated a German sign above a large sealed door at the end of the corridor. It was written in black Gothic letter. CO.AG Institute. It said. What the hell does that mean? I asked, confused. I know that it says Institute, but what of the part before that? Boris stepped aside, narrowing his eyes at the words. CO.AG, he muttered. It means black vein. This isn't just a lab. It's named like a project. A code name. For what? Valerie frowned. No one had an answer. Then came the sound. Faint, mechanical, the hum of electricity still flowing through some unseen veins of the building. Backup generators maybe, or something more. I don't like this, Natalia said, checking her magazine. Too clean, Yuri added. No dust, no decay. It's like this place was never abandoned. We pushed forward, guns up, lights sweeping, and the door before us creaked open. The door creaked open with an unnatural ease. For a moment, none of us spoke. Even Valerie, who had just forced open a trapdoor that probably hadn't seen daylight in months, seemed reluctant to take the first step inside. Behind the threshold, the corridor widened. The lighting above was cold and clinical. Some overhead fixtures flickered intermittently with power, but the rest remained dead. The deeper we went, the more our flashlights became our only source of illumination. This place wasn't a shelter. It wasn't even a base. It was something else entirely. I said in a low voice. Medical or scientific? Boris muttered, trailing his fingers along the wall. But not civilian. This place wasn't built for healing. Every surface looked polished, preserved, no cobwebs, no mold. The hallway split off into a dozen different corridors, each labeled in German. The signs were marked with unfamiliar code words, each more foreboding than the last. Versuch A13, Experiment A13, Zellenflüge 3, Cellwing 3, Entwicklungskammer, Development Chamber. We came to a large metal map encased in glass. Yuri wiped off the dust. It's a floor plan, he said, eyes narrowing. A maze. The CO.AG Institute wasn't just a lab. It was an underground complex. There were multiple floors, winding corridors, offshoots of offshoots. Some led to living quarters, others to containment, biometric analysis, and Verhaltensstudien, behavioral studies. Boris translated aloud as his fingers moved across the schematic. This entire complex is under the city's southern edge, maybe 2 kilometers of hallways. It wasn't built for evacuation. It was built for control. Isolation. Which part do we check first? Valerie asked. We stick together, Natalia said firmly. Eastern corridor first. And so the 6 of us moved out to the eastern corridor, whilst the rest of the squad went into other directions. As our boots echoed across the tile floor, I realized just how wrong the air smelled down here. It wasn't rot. It was chemical, bleach, preservatives, like the scent of a hospital that had died long before its patients. The first room we entered had a small window in the door. Inside were gurneys, stainless steel, restraints on the sides. Each one had dark, rust-colored stains pulled in the middle. One was bent, almost snapped, like something or someone had broken it from within. Boris shone his light on the wall. Look, he said. A black and white photograph tacked to a corkboard half-curled with age. It showed a man with sunken eyes and open sores on his chest. His mouth had been crudely stitched closed. There were dozens more pinned beneath it. Men, women, children, and some even babies, their faces all twisted in agony or frozen in blank stares. Test subjects. I heard Yuri make a sound when I looked back. I saw him standing at the other side of the hall, his back turned to us and leaning over. He was vomiting violently. After he had finished, he returned to us, the horror of what he saw still etched on his face. Let's keep moving, Natalia said. Her voice was hard, sharper than usual. The next hallway was even colder. The walls were lined with thick glass panels. Beyond them, cages. Not animal cages. These ones were human-sized. Each one had a drain on the floor, some stained dark. Long scratched claw marks lined the inside walls. Valerie stopped in front of one and held his light steady. A skeleton sat inside, slumped in the corner. Its skull was shattered in two, but its hands were still wrapped around the bars, fingers broken, locked in death's grip. The bones were small. A woman. My God, Boris breathed. The next room was a chamber with freezers and cold storage lockers, and inside, rows of vials and syringes, still carefully stacked. Some were labeled by blood type, others were marked with biological notes. Schattenblut, Typ 3, Shadow Blood Type 3, or Anomaly G82. One fridge was filled with cloves of garlic, another held raw steaks, the meat still looking fresh in some way. Yuri then opened a drawer and raised an eyebrow in pure confusion. Inside the drawer were wooden stakes, dozens of them, oak wood, perfectly carved, labeled and numbered like tools in a surgery. What is this place? Irina whispered. A pause. Then Boris answered, his voice nearly a whisper. A forge. We moved deeper. Now came the worst of it. The next lab had rust-colored stains across the floor. Desks were overturned, glass containers shattered. The walls had scratch marks, gouged deep enough to expose steel beneath the paneling. Yuri stepped forward toward a metal examination table. On it lay the remnants of something human, but it had no eyes. The sockets were stitched shut. The jaw was broken, dislocated. The chest cavity had been opened and sewn again with coarse twine. Irina gagged and turned away. This wasn't medicine, Boris said. This was transformation. There were papers with images of biology scattered across the floor. Most were partially burned, torn, or stained, but a few remained intact. Valerie picked one up and said, I can't understand German, but this here looks like blood compatibility tests, transfusions. Yuri snatched another of a nearby desk and said, Notes on photophobia, sensitivity to silver, unnatural muscle regeneration. What the hell were they trying to do here? We went a little further in the hallway, and then we saw it. We found a door with the sign Kommandantur on it, the command office. It was locked. Valerie didn't wait for orders this time. He slammed his boot into the steel. The first hit echoed. The second bent the frame. The third sent the door flying inward. The office inside was untouched, dustless, and at the desk sat a man. German, white coat, head slumped to one side, a pistol on the floor, a bullet hole in his temple. Side. On the desk lay a thick beige folder. 2 German words stood on it labeled in red. Top secret. I handed it silently to Boris. He opened it. Boris sat in the commander's chair and began reading aloud in a quiet, reverent voice. January 3rd, 1945. Phase 3 begins. Results inconsistent. Subject mortality remains high. Those that survive beyond day 4 begin showing signs of aggression and rapid cellular changes. The Polish resistance captives have proven more durable than Soviet POWs. However, increased resistance to sedatives has led to multiple containment breaches. Subject number 042 bit a researcher during examination. The subject was incinerated. Researcher died 2 hours later. The experiments involving extracted canine blood showed minimal results. Bovine blood entirely ineffective. Only direct human transfusion accelerates the process. Shadow blood, however, remains the most effective catalyst. Shadow blood? Valerie asked, confused. We said nothing. Boris continued. January 9th, 1945. We now believe the key lies in the manipulation of fear hormones. Subjects injected under high duress show faster mutation. Their bodies respond defensively. Strength, speed, sensitivity to light increase. Vision alters. Pupils dilate to near maximum. Eyes change color. Red hue observed in successful mutations. Subdermal bone growth present. Fingernails regeneration increased by 500%. Jaw dislocation to accommodate increased incisor size. Subjects begin showing pack behaviors. Vocalizations. They were building soldiers, Natalia said as her eyes widened. Not just normal soldiers, Yuri said. It sounds like soldiers of the night. All of us except Boris looked at Yuri. Vampires, Irina whispered in a low voice filled with dread. Boris read further. January 13th, 1945. Project Shadow Blood deemed ready for controlled deployment. Units to be trained in low-light combat. Loyalty conditioning still under review. Inoculation remains unstable. Boris's hands were trembling now, and sweat flew down his face like a waterfall. I could literally hear the drops of his sweat hitting the ground. He turned the page. Final entry. January 15th, 1945. Containment breach in Block 3. Subjects number 038 and number 042 escaped. Protocol enacted. Facility sealed. Team 2 dead. Command evacuation approved. Remaining researchers to barricade themselves in upper sector. If this note is found, do not attempt containment. Do not open doors. And most of all, do not go to Sublevel D. Boris's voice broke. He looked up at us. They didn't finish the project. It got away from them, turned on them. Yuri's eyes were wide as he asked, what happened to the subjects? Before anyone could answer, I noticed that that scientist had something in his coat. A notebook. I pulled it free and handed it to Boris. He flipped through the pages quickly. Scribbled notes, spilled ink, diagrams of veins, teeth, cross-sections of skulls. Most of it was repetition of what we already heard. Except the final page. Boris read aloud, his voice shaking now. The blood turned them, but not like we planned. They don't think. They devour. They tear, rip, consume. My colleagues were eaten alive. They didn't become vampires. They became something less. Things with purple eyes, rotting, but alive. The real vampires, the one who survived Phase 3, had vanished. I think they fled into the tunnels. They were fast. Too fast. I locked myself in the commander's office, the office from the coward who had fled this place yesterday. I can still hear them, scratching sometimes, whispering. I will not become like them. I will die with my mind intact. I only pray someone destroys this goddamn place. If you're reading this, run. Seal the doors. They are still here. Boris closed the book with a look of pure horror on his face. The silence in the room was complete. None of us breathed. And then, faintly, distantly, a scream. It echoed from somewhere deep within the complex. Then another, closer, shouts, gunfire, muffled. Then came many more. It was our comrades, but their screams somehow didn't sound human anymore. We grabbed our weapons. Take everything, Natalia ordered in a dead serious tone. The bullets, the stakes, move. Yuri reached into one of the cabinets and pulled free a pistol. A German Radom, fully loaded. He inspected the magazine and said, "These bullets, silver-tipped." He saw that there were more magazines with the same silver-tipped bullets. That's what they were using, Irina said. It's all over the labs. We ran through some of the hallways. Every step seemed to echo across the entire facility. Then, after about 5 minutes of endless running, we reached a corridor that was connected to multiple hallways. After we had stopped to catch our breath for the moment, we heard footsteps. Shuffling, fast, coming from every direction. The first one came from the east corridor, stumbling through the gloom like a drunk. At first, I thought it was one of our squad mates, maybe Dmitri or Andropov, dazed or wounded. But then our flashlight lit its face, and everything in my body locked up with horror. The skin was slack, discolored, tinged with a grayish rot. The mouth hung open, lined with jagged black teeth, some far too long, some just shards. The jaw was dislocated, slack-like it had tried to open wider than it should have. Its eyes, God help me, they glowed. Not bright, just enough. A cold, faint, purple shimmer, like something bioluminescent was pulsing beneath the pupils. Then came the hiss. Not a human noise, not even animal. Wet, burbling, hungry. And before I could speak, it charged. Valerie screamed first, not out of fear, but in warning. He raised his Papasha 41 and began to shoot wildly at the creature that had once been one of our comrades. Though the creature did stumble from the bullets, after Valerie had completely emptied his magazine, the creature straightened up again and kept coming. Irina was the next one to fire. She shot 3 rounds from her SVT-40, the first one hitting the creature in its left leg, then in its stomach, and lastly in its head. Nothing did the trick. The creature just stumbled back from Irina's shots, especially from the one in the head. But it once again regained its composure and charged at us again. The creature was now almost at us, and it jumped. It jumped higher than any human would, and it launched itself at Boris. With a loud shout, Yuri aimed the Radom pistol at the creature's head and shot. The silver bullet hit the creature between the eyes. It dropped like a sack of meat, sliding across the tile floor until it hit the wall with a wet slap. It was dead. Truly dead. That's when Yuri realized it. "Silver," he said. "What?" I asked, confused. "Of course," Yuri yelled. "In the document earlier, it said that the subjects were sensitive to silver. And when I picked up the silver bullets, Irina said they were all over the lab." But there was no time to celebrate. More footsteps came. From the left corridor, 3 more emerged. They wore the remains of Red Army uniforms. Our squad. Our comrades. One still had Natalia's scarf wrapped around its neck, trailing blood behind it like a streamer. But their faces were gone. No humanity left. Their movements were jerky, fast, almost insect-like in speed, but dead in rhythm. They were like puppets with snapped strings, now pulled by something much worse. "They're infected," Irina whispered. "Turned." Valerie stepped forward, his face a storm. "We killed them. Now!" He unloaded with his rifle, a full burst to the chest of the lead creature. It barely flinched. "Headshots!" I shouted. "Only the head." Boris scrambled to reload a silver tip clip into his Tokarev. "This is blasphemy," he yelled. Yuri took out the second one, shooting twice, both silver rounds to the skull. Irina dropped the third with a quick, clean shot that echoed like a bell of doom. Then silence returned. Just the smell of gunpowder and the rot of flesh that should not move. I stared down at one of the bodies. Her name was Tatiana. She'd sung lullabies at night to help the younger recruits sleep. Now half her face was missing. Her teeth had grown. Her nails had turned black and split at the tips like claws. "They were bitten," I whispered. "Turned into these things. But not vampires." Yuri knelt beside the corpse, examining the purplish blood leaking from the wound. "They're not fully undead," he said. "They're something between controlled, infected, like parasites took over the host." "Zombies," Valerie spat. Boris shook his head. "Not in the sense of folklore. This is scientifical. Engineered." A moan echoed through the corridor. Then another. Dozens. From every direction. We ran. We barreled down the corridor, following the only path not yet blocked by groans and footsteps. Our flashlights bounced wildly, casting jittery shadows that danced across blood-streaked walls. "This way," Natalia shouted, turning down a side hall marked Reactive Bereich. We found a heavy door at the end, reinforced with steel bars. Irina and I slammed it shut just as the first creature rounded the corner behind us. The lock clicked into place. We pressed our backs to the door, breathing hard. The pounding came seconds later. Dozens of fists, claws, hits. Yuri flinched with every impact. "We're not getting out the way we came," Valerie said, slumping against the wall. "No," Natalia agreed. "They'll be all over the stairwell by now." We turned. The room we just entered wasn't a normal hallway. It was a long arched tunnel, lined with pipes and cables. The floor sloped downward. "Maintenance corridor," Boris muttered. "Probably used for wiring. Maybe connects to another exit." "Or another lab," Irina said grimly. We moved in silence. The pounding on the door grew distant as we descended. The deeper we went, the more unnatural the architecture became. The tiles ended. The floors became dark concrete, almost organic in shape, like the walls had grown into place instead of being constructed. Eventually, the corridor widened into a large chamber. And that's when we saw them. Glass tanks. 8 of them. Each one the size of a coffin, standing upright against the far wall, filled with greenish fluid, thick as syrup. Electrical cables snaked into their sides, and faint lights blinked at their bases. 3 were shattered. The others still held. Shapes. Bodies. Not corpses. Not exactly. They floated, suspended in the fluid, pale, long-limbed, black veins running just underneath translucent skin. Their mouths were full of jagged, perfect teeth, and even submerged, their eyes glowed faintly red. "These," Yuri whispered. "These are the vampires." Irina raised a rifle. "Are they alive?" I stepped closer, heart hammering. The second tank's occupant twitched, just once. Its eyes opened, and they bored straight into mine. "Back!" Natalia yelled. "Don't touch the glass." We backed away slowly. Then something else caught my eye. Behind a desk at the far side of the chamber was a body, another scientist. German, a chunk taken from his throat, his chest torn open. But clutched in his hand was another journal. Boris retrieved it and opened it. The handwriting was frantic. "We tried to bind them. to command them, but they do not follow orders. They follow blood. When they feed, they become faster, smarter, stronger. The more they consume, the more human they pretend to be. Until you speak with one, and it smiles. That smile will haunt me. They killed everyone, the handlers, the scientists, even the SS guards who had their magazines loaded with silver-tip bullets. Then they began, turning them, slowly, biting but not draining, letting them change into those purple-eyed things that do their bidding. The infected become soldiers. The vampires become officers. This is how they intended to structure it, but there is no loyalty, only hunger. Boris flipped the journal to its last page. His voice was low. I think one escaped the tanks before the containment breach. It had shown signs of resistance to UV light. Silver slowed it, but it didn't kill it. The stake failed entirely. It grew new tissue in minutes. I named it CO.AG, and I think it is the true success of the project. After Boris had read the final page, there was silence, complete silence, until Valerie said, "So where is it now?" The power in the room flickered. One of the blinking lights on the tank dimmed, and far away down the corridor we had come from, something screamed. Not a moan, not a groan, a shriek, sharp, intelligent, hungry. We turned, lights up, weapons raised. Yuri whispered, "I think CO.AG is awake." We moved quickly, past the tanks, past the corpse, through a maintenance shaft on the other side of the lab that led deeper into the bowels of the institute. No one spoke for 10 full minutes. Then we heard the signs of another firefight. Up ahead, distant gunfire, screams, something snarling, wet tearing sounds. And then, silence again. The vampires had reached the rest of the squad. We reached a chamber that had once been a barracks. Torn beds, shredded bedding, blood on the walls, but magazines of the silver bullets remained. Valerie reloaded his Papasha 41, silently, his face grim. I knelt beside Yuri and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You okay, little brother?" I asked. He nodded, but his hands were shaking. Then he looked at me. "Ivan, if I get bitten," he started. "Don't," I said in a serious tone. "No, listen to me, Ivan," Yuri said. He swallowed. "If I get bitten, if I start to change, you know what you have to do." I didn't answer. I couldn't. Irina stepped between us and said, "You won't." And then the door behind us exploded. The explosion wasn't like with a blast of dynamite, but with force. Something ripped through the metal like it was paper, sending shards flying through the air like daggers. One chunk embedded itself into the wall beside Valerie's head. Another grazed Boris's leg, slicing through the fabric of his pants. Then it stepped through. At first, it looked almost human. A tall figure, pale as snow, with long limbs and sinewy muscle that rippled beneath skin stretched tight. Black veins coiled under the surface like roots beneath glass. Its face was clean-shaven, but wrung, eyes glowing faintly red. The irises too large, the mouth too wide, too calm. It wore a tattered SS officer's coat, open at the front like it didn't care for warmth or modesty. It opened its mouth slowly, too many teeth, and it was especially the canine teeth that were longer than they should be. And then, in the blink of an eye, it vanished. One moment, it was standing in the doorway. The next, it was behind us. Valerie was the first to move. He roared and began to shoot wildly with his Papasha 41, but totally forgetting the fact that he was using normal bullets and not silver-tipped ones. The bullets tore holes through the vampire's SS uniform and its skin. Yet, the vampire didn't flinch for a moment, and to my horror, it smiled. It smiled with a grin so big that it sent cold shivers across my spine like I had never felt before. Colder than even the temperature of the harsh Russian winters. Then, in a flash, the vampire dashed at Valerie at the speed of light, turned his hand into a fist and punched Valerie in the chest with all its might. Valerie flew across the room like a rag doll. Crashing through 2 bunks, he hit the wall with a crunch that made my stomach twist. "Valerie!" Natalia screamed. Irina opened fire with her SVT-40. Yuri followed with the radom he had taken earlier. They both used silver bullets. They hit. The thing staggered, once, then twice, but didn't fall. It dotted again, too fast. Before we knew it, it was in front of Boris, and then all of a sudden, Boris's throat opened like paper. His scream caught halfway through. Blood sprayed the wall. "Boris!" Irina yelled in horror. I let out a scream of fury and fired a silver bullet with my own SVT-40. My shot caught it in the shoulder. The vampire shrieked, not in pain, but rage. The sound shook the air, thick and layered, like the shriek of multiple mouths at once. "We need to fall back," Natalia yelled. "We have to regroup." Yuri and I dragged Valerie's limp body away, leaving Boris behind, what was left of him at least. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I'd known him for a year and a half, fought beside him, laughed with him. Now all that remained was a pool of blood and the knowledge that he died too fast to feel anything. We found a narrow tunnel, barely wide enough for 2. Irina fired another shot down the hall. The vampire was following us, slower now, cautious, watching, learning. "These things, they adapt," she breathed. "Can we kill it?" Natalia asked. "Enough silver," Yuri said. "Maybe, or the stake." Valerie strained in my arms, groaning. "Bastard cracked my ribs." "Don't talk," I whispered. "Save your strength." "Save it for what?" Valerie asked weakly. We didn't answer. The tunnel curved sharply, opening in a chamber filled with machinery. Old electrical equipment, rows of humming tubes, forgotten consoles. Lights blinked erratically on panels labeled in German. Blutdrucksteuerung, Erhaltung, Konditionierung. It was a pity that we didn't have Boris anymore to directly translate it. But Yuri stared at one panel with utter concentration for about 2 minutes, studying it. "This is their control room," Yuri finally said. "For what?" Natalia asked. He pointed. "Feeding cycles, temperature regulation, light exposure." "They were farming them," Irina said. "Like animals." Valerie leaned against the wall, clutching his ribs. "Where do we go from here?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Every exit we take leads deeper." Natalia moved to the far wall and opened a maintenance hatch. A staircase descended into blackness. "There's one more level," she said. "Sublevel D," Yuri whispered. The one the journal warned us never to enter. We looked at each other. There was no debate. We had to descend. Before we wanted to descend, however, we heard something behind us. Cold laughing. We looked to see that the vampire we faced earlier was standing about 20 meters from us, with a small army of those purple-eyed creatures. Some of them were dressed in white German lab coats. Others were SS guards with their steel helmets still on. And the others were the rest of our comrades. "Oh God," Natalia gasped. The creatures stood still next to their vampire master, hissing at us with their sharp teeth. Then, the vampire screeched in a demonic tone in German and pointed at us. "Auf dem." The purple-eyed creatures then began to walk fast to us, but not sprint. It was like the vampire was controlling their movements, like it wants us to be frightened. We began to shoot at the creatures' heads. It wasn't truly hard, since they weren't charging at us with full speed. They fell easily, but when we had to shoot the creature that had once been our comrades, the vampire saw that we were frightened to the bone, and it was amused by it. It was especially when we saw the 2 final zombies that our hearts stopped. They were standing right next to the vampire. On the vampire's right was the zombified version of Lieutenant Arseniev, and on its left, oh God, it was Boris. The vampire then pointed once more at us after we had managed to take down all the zombies it had sent first. Then, Lieutenant Arsenyev charged at me with full speed. Though not as fast as the vampire was, I let out a loud cry and shot a silver bullet at Lieutenant Arsenyev. I missed. I reloaded as he came closer and shot again. This time, I hit him in the stomach, but he leapt forward and jumped at me, his mouth wide open and sharp, rotten teeth exposing themselves clearly. I gasped, thinking that this is how I would end, at the teeth of what had once been the lieutenant of my squad. But then, a shot came from my left. 3 bullets pierced through Lieutenant Arsenyev's head, and his corpse nearly fell on me, completely motionless. I looked to my left and saw Yuri. Natalia and Irina had their guns raised. They had just saved me from death. When I looked back at the vampire, I noticed it looked more frustrated. It let out a hiss, showing its oversized teeth. And then, a zombified Boris charged at us, faster than Lieutenant Arsenyev had. We all panted heavily, the guns in our hands trembling. We have to shoot one of our closest comrades. Fire! Natalia eventually yelled. Me, Natalia, Yuri, and Irina all fired at once, the silver-tipped bullets hitting our former comrade in the chest multiple times. Then, Yuri's final shot of his radom hit Boris's head, and Boris's body, or corpse, whatever you want to call it, collapsed on its back. I saw tears running down my little brother's face. However, when we turned to see where the vampire was, it was gone. Before we could react, however, we heard a gurgling noise from behind us, and we saw something terrifying. The vampire was bending over behind Valerie, who was still sitting on the ground. It had its teeth impaled into the right side of Valerie's throat. The 4 of us froze, not able to move an inch. Then the creature looked at us, fresh warm blood still on its mouth, and we saw the bloodied neck of Valerie, with some of his veins turning black. The vampire let out a loud, ear-deafening shriek. We all yelled in fury and began to shoot wildly at it. The vampire, however, was held by Valerie, who, with the strength he still had grabbed the creature firmly with both of his hands by its left leg. Because of this, the vampire couldn't move, and our silver bullets were able to hit the creature in the chest multiple times. The creature screamed and staggered back, clearly weakened now. Then, we saw something that seemed like some kind of miracle. Valerie, despite the serious injuries he received and the blood still streaming out of his throat, he mustered all the strength he still had and stood up. He stepped towards the vampire with a grim and unwavering determination. And then, from the inside of his uniform, he pulled out a stake that he apparently had taken earlier. The vampire looked at Valerie, still angry but weakened. Valerie said just one phrase. "Bisvidanya, suka." And then, with all his strength, he impaled the oaken stake directly into the creature's heart without even needing a hammer. The vampire let out an ear-deafening scream, but Valerie kept pushing the stake deeper into the creature's heart until it finally came out of its back. The creature then started to vomit blood, black blood. Eventually, the vampire's glowing red eyes faded until there was nothing but darkness in its eyes. Then it collapsed, and after a few seconds, so did Valerie. Me, Irina, Natalia, and Yuri rushed to our comrade. "It's gonna be alright, Valerie," I said. "No," Valerie said weakly. "It's too late." The black veins were spreading faster across his body now. Valerie panted heavily and said weakly, "It was an honor fighting for the motherland, and more importantly, he began to cough out some blood as well now. It was a greater honor fighting beside you all," Valerie finished. Then, with the last strength he had, he pulled out his pistol and shot himself in the head. We all staggered back in shock from the gunshot. The brawn of our squad had just perished in the most gruesome way possible. Yuri, Irina, and I were panting heavily for some time, until Natalia eventually broke the silence. "We have to move deeper," she said with a heavy voice. We didn't protest, not that we had the strength to do it. We followed our sergeant, and we descended into Sublevel D. The stairwell was longer than any we'd seen. Each step felt like descending into a grave. The light grew colder. The concrete walls became darker, damp, and we reached the bottom. The door that met us was unlike the others. It was carved, not molded, black stone, inlaid with a twisted symbol I didn't recognize. A mixture of SS ruins, alchemical symbols, and something that looked disturbingly like a vertebrae pattern. "Why does this feel ancient?" Natalia asked, putting a hand on the door. "It's not age," Yuri said. "It's design. They made this place feel like a tomb." Irina opened it. Beyond was a room unlike the others. It wasn't sterile, wasn't clean. It was organic. The walls were concrete redstone, lit by faint flickering lights embedded like living tissue. The air was heavy with the scent of copper and rot. And in the center stood cages. 5 of them. 2 were open. The others still held occupants. Creatures. Not zombies. Not even vampires. These were monsters. One was covered in black, bristling hair, its limbs too long, its mouth split down the middle like a torn curtain. Another had no face, just a smooth mass of stretched skin where eyes and mouth should be. And the third watched us. Its eyes were solid purple, no iris, no whites. It grinned. Irina lifted her rifle. "Should we end them?" "No," Yuri said. "That's not what this room is." He walked to a console, wiping dust from its screen. "This isn't a prison," he said. "It's a display, a showcase." "For what?" Irina asked. I answered. "For someone important. Someone they wanted to impress." Yuri's voice was faint. Someone they feared. Then we heard the scraping. A slow sound. Nails. Claws. Bone. We turned. A shadow moved at the top of the stairs. Natalia raised her rifle in shock. "What? It survived?" she yelled. "No," Irina said. "It's another." The other vampire stepped into view. This one smaller, gaunter, but its red eyes burned brighter. It crept down the stairs like a spider, silent except for the hiss of its breath. Yuri fired a silver bullet. The thing dodged. It leapt sideways, clinging to the ceiling, then dropped down behind Natalia. It was too fast. Natalia turned and swung her rifle at the creature. The stock hit its face, but instead of the vampire staggering back from the hit, the stock of a rifle broke. The vampire looked straight into Natalia's eyes and grinned evilly. Then, the vampire focused all of its strength into its right arm and pierced through Natalia's chest. We gasped and watched in horror as the vampire's hand stuck out of Natalia's back, with her blood-soaked heart still beating in its right hand. Once more, Irina let out a furious war cry and shot a silver bullet to the creature's left leg with her rifle. The creature shrieked, loosened its grip on Natalia's heart, and dropped it onto the ground. After that, it pulled back its arm out of her chest and fled to a darker corner, readying itself to make another strike. We saw how Natalia fell on her knees, blood flowing out of the hole the vampire made. She turned her head and looked at us one more time. We had tears in our eyes. She then weakly smiled at us, and with the last strength she could muster, she saluted. She saluted for the honor of leading us into battle after battle, and then she collapsed. "No," I whispered. There was a moment of silence, but that didn't last. We heard noises coming from all over the room. The vampire was still on us. We saw it dashing through the room with an immense speed. It was trying to disorient us from where it would attack. Me and Irina went back to back against each other. Yuri wanted to join in. But then, "Yuri, watch out!" Irina yelled at the top of her lungs. Yuri turned around, but in a flash, he was flying across the room and bumped into a table. Then, the vampire launched itself towards me and Irina. It jumped about 3 meters into the air, launching itself at us, shrieking. Me and Irina both aimed our rifles at the creature with one last silver bullet in it. We pulled the trigger at the same time and fired. Bullseye. The silver-tipped bullets of both my and Irina's SVT-40 had hit the jumping creature at the same time. Its head exploded. The body of the vampire fell with a loud thud, inches before our feet. The body twitched for around 5 more seconds, and then stopped. Irina and I panted, weary from all the fighting we had gone through in this facility. We looked each other in the eyes. We had saved each other again in a hard time. We smiled at each other, wanting to kiss each other due to the sheer love we shared. But that kiss couldn't come, as we heard footsteps next to us. "Ivan," Yuri's voice said weakly, cracking a bit. I looked to my right and saw Yuri walking slowly and weakly to us with his radom still in his right hand. His face was pale, but there was something on the left side of his throat. A bite mark. My heart sank to my stomach as my eyes widened in horror, and I dropped my rifle. Black veins were already creeping beneath Yuri's skin. "How?" I muttered softly, but clearly horrified. Yuri groaned and said, "Just before it sent me flying across the room, it quickly bit my throat, though I didn't notice it until I was on the table." I was gasping heavily. "Ivan," Yuri said with a face that suggested something. Something he said to me before we met the first vampire in the barracks. "No," I said sternly. "No, Yuri, we can fix it. There's still time." "No, there's not," Yuri said calmly. "We saw what happened to Tatiana, to Lieutenant Arsenyev, to Boris." Irina looked away, tears already in her eyes. I shook my head, taking a step back, my voice cracking with horror and sorrow. No, I can't." "You have to," Yuri whispered. "Before I turn, before I hurt you." He walked to me and placed the radom pistol in my right hand. "It still has 1 silver-tip bullet in its magazine," Yuri said with a weak smile. "Make this one count, brother." I sighed heavily. I felt my heart beating in both my chest and throat. I raised the gun to Yuri's head. My hands were trembling. I looked at my younger brother one more time with a frightened and sorrowful face, tears running down my cheeks like a waterfall. He smiled at me and said, "Tell Mama and Papa that I love them. Tell them I fought for them and the motherland." I gritted my teeth and closed my eyes. "I love you, Yuri," I said softly with a heavy heart and a waterfall of tears. I pulled the trigger. The shot echoed through the room. For about 3 seconds, there was silence. Then, I slowly opened my eyes again. Yuri lied with his back on the ground, his face still smiling, staring upwards. But there was a clean bullet hole between his eyes. My tears didn't stop flowing, and my mouth began to open. I tried to scream, but the pain was too deep and overwhelming. All that came out of my mouth were heavy sobs and gasps. I had killed my brother, my one and only brother. I never cared that we were born from a different mother. He was one of the closest persons that I knew, that I loved. My right hand loosened its grip on the radom, and it dropped on the floor. I fell on my knees, still sobbing heavily. After about 10 seconds, Irina knelt beside me. I looked at her. Although her mouth was closed, she too had tears streaming down her cheek like a waterfall. She then hugged me tight, and I hugged her back, still sobbing for Yuri's loss. I had taken my brother's life. Because I had to. Because this place demanded it. After what felt like an eternity, we made it out of the underground facility the way we came. Our uniforms were covered in blood. Some of it was black blood. We were frozen, traumatized, but still alive. Just the 2 of us. A squad of Red Army soldiers found us 2 hours later, sweeping the area of southern Warsaw. When they saw our condition and heard only fragments of what happened, they brought in officers, and those officers then notified the Soviet generals. Only hours after we had witnessed that living nightmare, we were debriefed by 3 Soviet generals. They didn't scream. They didn't accuse us of insanity. They just listened in silence as we told them everything. Hell, to prove that we didn't speak any nonsense, me and Irina led the generals and many Soviet soldiers down to that godforsaken facility we had barely survived not long ago. We showed the generals the lab documents, the twisted remains of our comrades, the ruins of the command office and the tanks. They said little, but they believed us. Then they took the evidence and issued the orders. The facility was to be wiped from the earth. They brought in engineers and demolition squads, flooded the lower levels with chemical fire, collapsed the tunnels, buried everything under concrete. The 3 generals ordered us to never speak about it to anyone, not even our families. We were pulled from the front line for 2 weeks, questioned again, then sent back, this time to the Battle of Kustrin, then the Battle of Silo Heights, and lastly, Berlin itself. And when our glorious red flag flew over the Reichstag, Irina and I stood together, both of us holding hands. We should have felt victorious. We didn't. The war ended. The world moved on. But the real war, the one that took place beneath the grounds of Warsaw, never left us. In early January 1946, Irina and I returned to Russia. Our families greeted us with tears, bread, vodka, and open arms. My stepmother asked about Yuri. I told her he died in the southern outskirts of Warsaw on January 18, 1945. With tears in her eyes, she asked how. I said, "It's too horrible to speak of, Mama, but I can assure you, our Yuri died a hero of the motherland." She never pressed the subject again. Irina and I quickly moved to Samara, a quiet city on the eastern banks of the Volga, enough to forget the worst parts of the past, at least on the surface. We got married in May 1946. A small wedding, simple, but honest. In March 1947, our first child was born. It was a healthy boy. We named him Yuri. In September 1949, we had a beautiful daughter. We named her Natalia. People say naming your children after the dead is a way of keeping them alive. But that's not why we did it. It's because we needed them to matter, not just to ourselves, but to the world, to someone. After we had moved into Samara, I found work as a rail technician. Irina worked in a textile factory. We lived in a small but warm house not far from the Volga River. We had everything we needed to live a normal life, and our 2 wonderful children brought absolute joy in our lives. But we never told anyone what happened in Warsaw. Not our friends, not our neighbors, not our own parents, not even our children, especially not our children. Because the truth was more than horror, it was contagious. A truth like that spreads in the mind. It eats at reason. It leaves stains. So we lived, quietly, lovingly, gratefully, but we always kept the order of the generals. Me and Irina always kept the pact we made between ourselves after we were victorious in Berlin. Never speak of Warsaw. January 18th, 1975. Samara, the Soviet Union. 30 years. Today marks 30 years since that day in January beneath the ruins of Warsaw's southern outskirts. I sit here now in my study, the winter snow falling gently outside the window. It's quiet, almost peaceful, except for the ever-present humming of the radiators and the ticking of the clock above the fireplace. But every tick feels like a reminder. Every winter, it returns. The cold, the silence, the way the snow makes the world feel like it's holding its breath. Irina is in the kitchen, humming softly. She doesn't hum often, but today she does. Maybe to keep her hands steady as she stirs the tea. She knows what day it is. She always does. We've never forgotten. We never will. And because it has been exactly 30 years, I feel the weight of it all returning. My hands tremble more these days. The faces of the dead, Boris, Valerie, Natalia, Yuri, they visit me more often. Not just in dreams or nightmares, but in reflections, in moments when the house is still, and all I can hear is the snow tapping against the window pane like knuckles on a coffin lid. Earlier this day, our son Yuri came by with his 2 young children, Lev and Nikolai, our grandchildren. Bright, loud, full of laughter. The oldest of only 4 years, Lev, ran through the hallways, pretending to be a Soviet pilot. I laughed. I even joined him for a moment, flying invisible planes through the air. But the moment he left the room, a shadow fell over me again. I see his face, and I see the face of my little brother Yuri. I hear laugh, and I remember the sound of that final silver bullet echoing off the concrete walls. Irina came to me earlier. She sat beside me, took my hand in hers. "You're thinking of them again, aren't you?" she asked. I nodded. She squeezed gently. "We're still here." "I wish he was," I whispered. "We survived, Ivan. That has to mean something." "I know," I said. "But I can still hear them. At night, I still see their eyes." Irina looked down, quiet for a moment. Then she said, "So do I. I sometimes wonder if I had died down there, would that have been easier? Would it have been simpler to let the vampire take me, to fall with my brother and my comrades? But no, there is a reason I lived, a reason Irina did too. Because if someone had to carry this memory, this truth, it had to be someone who can endure it without letting it grow. We carry it like a sealed vial, hidden, contained, like the CO.AG Institute was. Because if even one word escaped our mouths, no one would believe us. Or worse, someone would. And then they would dig, and they would open what should remain buried. Earlier this evening, I took out the small wooden box I've kept hidden for 30 years. Locked, dust-covered, always stored behind the old army medals and faded family photos. Inside is the last journal page I took from the German scientist that laid in the command office in the CO.AG Institute. I couldn't destroy it, because some part of me feared we didn't kill them all. That Ada, the black vein, was never caught in the fire. That somewhere, beneath some other forgotten ruin, something still stirs, still remembers, still hungers. And if one day someone finds a similar door, a hatch etched with ruins and darkness, they'll open it, and the cycle will begin again. So I kept the page, a warning, the final words scrawled in fading German ink. They are still here. Tonight, I lit a candle in Yuri's memory. I whispered a prayer, not for his soul, because I know where his soul is. He died as a hero for the motherland, and in my eyes at least, the world. But I whispered a prayer for the world itself, a world that doesn't know what nearly devoured it. Irina joined me. We sat together in silence. Outside, the wind picked up. The snow danced like ash. And for just a moment, I thought I heard something. A distant shriek, almost like a voice, deep under the earth. But when I listened again, it was only the wind, only the past. And I knew it was time to finally write it all down. For someone, for anyone, so that if it happens again, if they come again, you'll know what we saw, what we survived, what will never escape. Because the deadliest weapons the Nazis ever made weren't guns, tanks, or bombs. They were things built beneath the earth, made of blood and shadow. And if they ever wake again, you won't be ready. No one will.